Hi, my name is Dong and I'm an animator. And I'm sure you have seen one of these scenes before in Japanese animation, a common, normal, high school classroom. Believe it or not, we don't actually draw these by hand anymore, especially after 2010 or so. All those desks and stuff you see are essentially all 3D models. Even if they look like they were a 2D hand-drawn cell layer, they were most likely traced from a 3D model underneath. Why? Because they are hard and they take significant effort to get right. Why do that when we can get the 3D department to build a 3D scene in a couple of minutes? Today, let's draw this. A scene of a couple of friends enjoying lunch. Being able to draw a scene like this really shows your knowledge of perspective and layout drawing. It's hard, but we do it because it is hard. I'll be drawing this in Clip Studio Paint, but you can do this in your software of choice. I'll leave a link to the layout template I use in the description. With difficult and complex scenes, I think it's a good idea to take some time and draw a quick thumbnail to plan everything out. We'll have our scene like this, with the character in focus sitting at the back and the two others looking at her. There will also be a bunch of empty desks behind them. Then let's lower the opacity on that layer and create our perspective grid. You can't really do a perspective drawing without one of these. I'll create a 3D layer and then enable the 3D ruler to use Clip Studio's perspective grid tool. A bunch of other software has the same feature, or you can just choose to freehand your perspective grid as well. Based on our thumbnail drawing, our horizon is around the top of the scene with us looking down on the characters. Now on a new layer, we can draw our BG. Our BG will just be the back two walls. The desks are generally considered a 2D cell layer for these type of scenes. And copying over our perspective grid to the A cell folder, we can then create a new layer there and start roughing out the desks. Try and space them apart evenly if you can. I talked about this before in a previous video, but the X method of drawing two crossed lines can help you determine where the midpoint is between two objects. Alright, let's get the rest of those desks in there, as well as the accompanying chair. For the desks that our characters will occupy, I think making them slightly off-axis, where they don't exactly follow the perspective grid, can really add to the realism of the scene. With the position of the desks figured out, let's work on our characters next. We'll create a new layer and lower the opacity of our desks to make it easier to draw. And again, let's rough them in with large geometric shapes. It's important to slowly work them up from the rough stages as we add detail. As we draw, keep in mind the perspective. Remember that we are looking down at our characters since our horizon is so high. I am planning to combine the characters and the desks into one cell layer at the end, and we can figure out which line should be above which later. So this is essentially rough animation, so I'm keeping my lines nice and loose. I'm looking more to capture the emotion of the scene and the essence of our characters than making sure that everything is right 100%. And to get the layering correct, I erased the excess line of our character that should be hidden below the desk. And with our characters drawn, let's go back to finishing the desks. It's tedious, but let's go through each desk and add any necessary details such as running out the corners and getting the steel structures of the legs working. If you can, it's always good to get a photo reference of a standard school desk on a separate monitor to look at while drawing, which is what I'm doing right now. The legs of the desks and the legs of the chairs combined make this drawing more complicated as you progress. It is important to still take your time and follow the perspective grid when you are lost. For a drawing like this, the correct perspective is everything. To get the layering working, here I created a layer mask on the line work and erased part of the mask to remove that part of the layer. Once the desks and chairs are done, we can add some detail. On the standard school desks over here, there is a hook on each side that students can use to hang their bags. So let's add that. And again, make sure to match the perspective as we draw. The desks themselves are also looking pretty empty, so let's add a bento box, some books maybe, and a drink. With that done, let's lower the opacity on our cell layer and let's work on the BG, which is essentially those two back walls. There's generally a shelf in the back of most classrooms where the students get their own personal cubby to put books and supplies. I guess this is the equivalent of American hallway lockers. And unlike schools in North America, you generally stay in the same classroom for the whole semester and teachers come to you for the most part. Then there is a blackboard in the back, and it's essentially used as a bulletin board of sorts. Let's also add some flooring, and these older schools have this really nice hardwood flooring that I like. With our line work done, I would like to painting a backing for our cell layer. This is a very complicated scene and this should help the drawing read better. Let's create a layer at the bottom of the cell folder, and let's use light yellow, which is what we commonly use in industry, to create our backing for our cell layer. Moving back to the BG, let's do some shading. I create a separate layer underneath and use a big blue brush to indicate shade. I would like the light to come in from that big window on screen right. I think that would look really dramatic, especially with all the shadows being cast by the window frame. We can also light the scene in a way that puts the light and focal point of the scene on our characters. I'm also going to paint in the shadows of the desks on the BG. And this might sound strange not having the cell layer shadow be on the cell layer, but this is a common way to approach this kind of scene. Alright, now it is time to finish up the shading on our cell layer. And like always, let's create a new layer for our color separation lines, using blue for shadows and red for highlights. Our light sources are coming from the top right, so it will produce a nice rim light on our characters. Alright, let's create a new layer and shade this in. I generally use different colors to differentiate areas like the skin and hair, as this will help later down the animation pipeline during doga or cell painting. And finishing up, I think this is a cute and wholesome scene. What do you think? If we had used 3D desk models, this scene would have been much easier to draw even if we had to trace them. And that's why we do it that way nowadays in the industry. Believe it or not, this actually happens a lot in Japanese animation, where a lot of the complex 2D objects you see were actually done with the help of a 3D model. For example, I was recently on an episode of One Piece where the main character's ship had to move as a 2D animated layer. And to get that to work, I would draw and animate the ship as a 2D cell element, and then the 3D team would put the 3D model in the scene and match it to my drawing, and then I would tie it down again in 2D. Alright, that's it. Thanks everyone, especially channel and patron members that support the channel. You guys help keep this running. Supporters get extra content every month, and this month is a companion video to this video where you can see me draw the scene without cuts. Anyways, check out my social media, and I'll see you next time.